The thwarted cash-in-transit heist, which law enforcement managed to intercept literally at the 11th hour before millions of rand would have disappeared without a trace, has suddenly taken a politically explosive turn that even veteran investigators could scarcely have anticipated. What many citizens initially dismissed as just another brazen robbery on South Africa's highways has now erupted into a full-blown scandal pointing disturbingly close to the highest levels of government, placing the African National Congress directly in the spotlight and dragging President Ramaphosa's name straight into the center of a firestorm that shows no signs of subsiding anytime soon. The dramatic chain of events began when alert officers noticed a suspicious vehicle tailing a cash transport van along one of the nation's most heavily trafficked routes. Following weeks of heightened security warnings and an alarming surge in CIT attacks across multiple provinces, the officers acted without hesitation. They moved decisively to force the vehicle off the highway and apprehend the suspects before a single shot could be fired. On the surface, this appeared to be a textbook interception triumph in the relentless battle against sophisticated armed robbery syndicates. But the genuine shock emerged the very moment investigators conducted a thorough search of the suspects and uncovered evidence that immediately triggered serious alarm bells. Communication logs, encrypted messages, financial receipts, and meticulously handwritten instructions were discovered among their possessions, none of which matched the typical operational patterns of criminal organizations known for executing CIT heists across the country. There was something fundamentally different about this operation, something far more methodically organized, carefully calculated, and deliberately orchestrated at higher levels. The deeper SAPS investigators excavated into the seized evidence, the more digital forensic analysis began uncovering disturbing connections leading in directions nobody had anticipated or wanted to explore. Phone numbers extracted from the suspects' mobile devices traced directly to sophisticated encrypted messaging platforms that were definitively linked to individuals with well-documented ties to powerful ANC political structures and regional party machinery. Comprehensive background checks conducted on 2 of the men detained at the scene left seasoned investigators absolutely stunned to uncover that both suspects had previously held positions within municipal government departments operating under ANC leadership and oversight. Even more deeply troubling was the shocking revelation that both men possessed remarkably pristine criminal records despite previous intelligence briefings and confidential reports linking them to suspicious cases that mysteriously never progressed to formal prosecution or trial. Senior police officials privately confessed that for many years there had been persistent whispers and unconfirmed allegations of high-level political protection shielding certain connected individuals from legal consequences, but this represented the first concrete instance where hard digital evidence and forensic data appeared to substantiate those long-standing suspicions and troubling rumors. The most incriminating and damaging discoveries emerged from a heavily encrypted electronic device that was confiscated from one of the primary suspects during the arrest. Contained within this device was an extraordinarily detailed record of suspicious financial activity, including multiple transactions flowing between offshore banking accounts registered under deliberately anonymous shell corporations and various local intermediaries strongly suspected of operating as covert political operatives and money handlers. The transaction patterns and financial fingerprints were immediately recognizable to veteran investigators who had previously worked extensively on complex corruption cases connected to bitter internal ANC factional battles and power struggles. Several distinctive transaction signatures reportedly matched banking accounts that had already been flagged and red-listed in previous official inquiries examining the blatant misuse of state resources and highly questionable financial flows traced back to powerful individuals operating within President Ramaphosa's immediate inner circle and trusted advisory network. According to a confidential insider with direct knowledge of the investigation, this compelling evidence suggested not merely the existence of parallel and illicit funding streams, but quite possibly active coordination and strategic collaboration between entrenched political networks and sophisticated organized crime syndicates. Perhaps even more significant to the investigating officers, however, were classified documents bearing official security markings clearly indicating that the sensitive information contained within was not to be shared or escalated through normal channels without explicit prior approval from senior government officials at ministerial level. For experienced forensic analysts and veteran investigators who had grown battle-hardened from years of uncovering systematic corruption and state capture, this discovery was extraordinarily unusual and profoundly unsettling on multiple levels. The implications were staggering because it strongly indicated that someone wielding considerable institutional authority and political power had apparently anticipated that this explosive material might eventually surface and had taken deliberate preemptive steps to strictly control and limit who could access the damaging information. It was precisely these official restriction markings that kept reinforcing the disturbing possibility that powerful and well-connected figures might have already attempted or could still be actively trying to suppress and bury the complete truth from public scrutiny. The central question now haunting investigators and keeping them awake at night is as deceptively simple as it is dangerously complex and politically charged. Why would a violent cash-in-transit robbery operation possess such extensive and documented links to formal political structures, particularly those directly associated with the country's ruling party and its leadership hierarchy? Preliminary theories actively circulating within the elite Hawks unit suggest that the dramatic increase in CIT robberies witnessed over the past several years may not be exclusively attributable to independent criminal syndicates operating alone for profit. Rather, compelling evidence suggests that certain of these seemingly random attacks could actually be functioning as sophisticated parallel revenue generation streams for warring internal political factions desperately fighting for organizational control and financial dominance in the crucial run-up to contested national elections. As legitimate legal donation channels become increasingly regulated and monitored, and as governmental systems of rigorous financial oversight grow progressively more stringent and difficult to circumvent, dangerous illegal operations may be systematically filling critical funding gaps needed for expensive campaign war chests, destructive factional battles, and elaborate loyalty-building networks that keep party structures intact. Credible hints of such clandestine arrangements have emerged from several courageous whistleblowers, who bravely came forward in recent months to testify under protection that certain prominent ANC leaders routinely turned to established crime syndicates and criminal networks during critical periods when legitimate party funding sources run dangerously dry or are deliberately withheld by rival factions. These protected witnesses even claimed under oath that President Ramaphosa himself was fully aware of these illegal funding activities and their criminal origins but consciously chose to do absolutely nothing to stop or expose them because taking decisive action would inevitably fracture already fragile party alliances and trigger destructive internal warfare. Whether these explosive allegations are completely true or represent politically motivated claims designed to destabilize leadership, even the accusations themselves are dramatically increasing public outrage both from ordinary citizens and among competing political factions sensing blood in the water. Opposition political parties certainly did not waste a single moment in capitalizing aggressively on these devastating revelations and explosive disclosures. The strongest and most forceful public statements issued by both the Democratic Alliance and the Economic Freedom Fighters called unequivocally on President Ramaphosa to immediately step aside and suspend himself while thorough investigations proceed and unfold, forcefully insisting that absolutely no national leader who has their name connected anywhere to organized criminal networks and illegal funding operations can possibly remain in high office with any credibility. A senior police commander with intimate knowledge of the case reportedly issued a stark warning behind tightly closed doors that the substantial evidence already collected and documented so far has the genuine potential to trigger the single largest and most comprehensive corruption investigation the nation has witnessed since the devastating era of state capture under previous administrations. He characterized the intense political pressure being applied to suppress and bury the explosive case as absolutely immense and unprecedented, stronger and more coordinated than anything experienced even during the most politically controversial and divisive years of previous government inquiries and commissions. The ANC leadership is reliably reported to be in an absolute state of panic and crisis mode throughout its organizational structures and regional branches nationwide. Emergency meetings hastily convened at Luthuli House headquarters have become increasingly frequent and tense, with heated debates and angry confrontations erupting constantly over how the deeply divided party should strategically handle this escalating crisis before it destroys them completely. There are influential voices who passionately feel the organization must immediately distance itself entirely from the arrested suspects and their alleged activities and permit a full, transparent investigation if the party has any realistic hope of surviving this devastating incident intact. Others deeply fear that revealing and exposing everything publicly may irreparably tear the already fragmented ANC apart and permanently divide the competing factions beyond any hope of reconciliation, utterly destroying what little public trust and electoral support still remains. Bitter internal conflict is growing exponentially sharper with each passing day as more damaging information continues leaking steadily into mainstream media outlets amid stern warnings from experienced political analysts and observers that this mushrooming scandal could realistically lead to widespread forced resignations or dramatic reshuffling throughout the entire ANC leadership structure and national executive. Meanwhile, President Ramaphosa himself has remained conspicuously and strategically silent on all aspects of the scandal. Although senior advisors extremely close to him are reliably reported to have urgently pressed and begged him to speak out publicly and categorically deny any personal implication or knowledge, he has stubbornly refused to do so thus far. This calculated silence has only deepened public suspicion even further and fueled rampant speculation that this constitutional crisis could rapidly escalate into a full-scale leadership challenge and potential removal process. Millions of South Africans are particularly deeply disturbed and troubled by the president's continuing refusal to clearly and unambiguously clarify his personal stance and relationship to the allegations. Such prolonged silence and strategic avoidance by the sitting president creates the unmistakable impression that he may be completely overwhelmed and paralyzed by the dangerous dynamics of vicious internal party politics, or perhaps even genuinely uncertain about how much of the buried truth is about to explosively emerge into public view. Determined investigators continue their meticulous work around the clock, and there are increasingly strong indications that additional arrests, including several high-ranking political figures and senior officials, may be imminent within days. Specialized forensic teams are still painstakingly analyzing massive volumes of data, systematically cross-checking complex financial histories, and laboriously tracing sophisticated encrypted communication paths across multiple platforms and international borders. If the mounting evidence ultimately leads where preliminary findings strongly indicate and suggest, the country could very soon face a catastrophic political earthquake quite unlike anything witnessed in recent memory or modern history. At this precarious stage, the entire nation waits anxiously and nervously as a violent robbery that never actually occurred becomes the unexpected catalyst for an extraordinary and unprecedented unraveling of political power, systematic corruption, and dangerous hidden alliances operating in the shadows. What initially started with a small group of armed suspects intercepted on a busy highway roadside has dramatically transformed into a constitutional case fully capable of fundamentally shaking the very foundations of democratic government and institutional trust. As shocking new revelations continue emerging daily and political pressure intensifies from all directions, one thing is becoming increasingly certain and undeniable. President Ramaphosa's profound political troubles and legal jeopardy are only just beginning to surface, and the devastating fallout and consequences may permanently alter and reshape South Africa's entire political landscape and power structures for many years to come.